Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today's event at the Middle East Initiative at Harvard Kennedy School. We are delighted to be hosting this conversation between our Senior Fellow, Chairman of the Jerusalem, and Director Emeritus of the Israel Museum, James Snyder, with the renowned Artistic Director and Choreographer of the Batsheva Dance Company, Ohad Naharin. Before I hand the event over to James, please know that we are recording this event. While this event is on the record, please note that the attendees, including journalists, are prohibited from recording or distributing parts or all of the event program without prior written authorization. Time permitting, we will be taking questions from the audience at the end. If you would like to ask a question at that time, please use your raise the hand function or send your question to Ava Weber in the chat, today's technical event host. And now your host for today's event, James Snyder.
Thank you, Michaela. And it's a pleasure to have all of you with us. Good afternoon. If you're here on the East Coast in the US, good evening. If you are in the Middle East. It's great to be together. This is the first talk for our spring season, continuing our theme from the fall of engaging with creative practitioners in all kinds of disciplines, talking about interpreting the cultural complexities of the Middle East as pathways to a different understanding of the region and to different understandings, many of them, to the region. In the fall, we focused on religion, film, television, and architecture. We're starting now the spring semester with dance. It's actually a privilege in a lot of ways to be hosting Ohad Naharin today. He is a stellar choreographer, the longtime artistic director of Batsheva Dance Company, now house choreographer there. And those positions really are capstone to a very astonishing career for him. For all of us, what he was able to do was elevate the trajectory of dance in Israel, which is a long and rich tradition there, started long before the founding of the State of Israel, and to give that tradition global stature. I don't really want to start with the biography of Ohad. I think we'll sort of understand that story as part of understanding what his work is all about. But actually, I want to make a short narrative of our oddly parallel lives. Ohad and I were born in the same year. Each of us was born in a small place that somehow would come to play a big part in shaping our lives as our lives have unfolded. Oddly enough, we started our careers exactly in the same year, 1974. Ohad started dancing with Batsheva, and that year I arrived at MoMA to begin my professional life there. And for each of us, those moments in 1974 were landing us in new territories. For Ohad, Martha Graham came to Israel soon after he arrived at Batsheva, and in a funny way, the rest for him is history, and we'll talk a bit more about that. An interesting note, we both embrace East and West, and for Ohad, it was really about coming from the East to New York to dance with Martha Graham and then continue from there. For me, it was about starting at MoMA and then 20 years later, moving on to Israel. When I landed in Israel in 1997, 1998, feeling that I was landing from another planet, there were headlines in the media about a work called Achad Miyodea. We're going to talk about that a little more later. It's a signature mid-career work for Ohad. And the story in the newspapers was about how it was or wasn't going to be part of the celebration of Israel's 50th anniversary. It was a kind of perfect storm of intersection between culture and local politics. It was a kind of lightning bolt for me, arriving from a completely different kind of setting where culture had a different place here in the US. And that moment put Ohad on my radar. And then 20 some years later, as I was wrapping up my tenure at the Israel Museum, Ohad produced Venezuela, a stunning work in 2017, a really profoundly beautiful work, which again was about the perfect storm of intersection between culture and politics. In that case, though, not about local politics in Israel, but about world politics in a way leading to the global political crisis that we are all feeling today. Interestingly enough, for me in 2017, I saw that production 3 times. I saw it first in Jerusalem, then I saw it in Tel Aviv, and actually 2 years later, it was produced here in New York in Brooklyn, and I saw it there as well. And in a way, it was a kind of coming home for me back to the US and continuing this long history of connection and personal resonance with Ohad. So for all of those reasons, it's a special privilege to have him here with us today, and really to have him here to talk about not just the meaning of the legacy of dance in Israel and the Middle East, but how his own work embodies and continues to embody that trajectory. So Ohad, really, I want to start talking about dance, how it came into you and what dance in the region means for you. You know, it's interesting. Some things in this past century came from the West to the Middle East, like the modernist architectural tradition. Dance is not like that. Dance in the Middle East is very local and it's rooted in the culture. And I think your own maturing over time in dance has to do with that. So tell us.
Hello. So the essence of dance actually has nothing to do with geography. It has to do with the human body, space, and time, and movement. And this is how actually I was drawn from as early as I remember myself to dance, because I was curious about movement. And I watch my mother move, and I watch animals move, and I watch cars moving on bridges. So movement, I experience my own effort, pleasure, speed, explosiveness, and all the things that connect to dance did not connect to the Middle East. They're very personal. And still today, dancing for me is not about performing, actually. You don't need audience if you want to dance. You don't even need music if you want to dance. Just need space and time. And a lot of my dancing I do alone. And a lot of how I share the idea of why and how we want to dance connect to this idea of dancing alone. My dancers love to perform, but they enjoy dancing also where they don't have eyes looking at them. When we're in the studio and we explore and we share discoveries, and we bring it to the stage remains a laboratory. And many times we are the lookers, not necessarily those who are looked at. As an Israeli and as someone who was exposed to Israeli music, Arab music, Polish music, Russian music because of my grandparents, folk dancing, those things decorated my work, but they're not in the essence of my work. And it's not in the essence of why I dance and why I choreograph.
You know, Ohad, it's interesting. A thing about you and your work and watching you perform and watching your dancers perform, it is clear that this is not about a tradition of an ordered vocabulary of dance. It's about movement, and it's about something that comes personally from you. And, you know, you and I don't talk about politics. We never talk about politics. I don't in general. And yet there is something about your work, and we're going to talk about a few examples where clearly what you see on the stage, what you see in the movement, which, because you're the choreographer, the movement comes from you, is about expressing a kind of social or even political conscience. It's not about being politically active. It's not about activism, but it is radiating a sentiment that can be social, political, or otherwise, that comes from you as the maker. And I've seen, many of us have seen this amazing, these home videos of you as a kid, and you are dancing like the dancer and choreographer that you've become. So there is this kind of connectedness with where you started that brings you to where you are. And I know you have said from time to time that as a kid and a young guy, you never thought about being a dancer, and suddenly you were a dancer. So what was it in that upbringing of yours that made you realize one day when you were 22 in 1974 that dance was the mode of expression for you?
Well, I agree with you that there is social conscience, totally, because social conscience connect me to human values, to abuse of power, innocent victims, love, generosity, delicacy, explosive power, efficiency of movement, the clear form, the right tension between elements that create a composition. And the politics, not only in Israel, is something that I'm very aware of since I was, since I remember, but way before I started to dance. I have parents that were very liberal, that had a lot of anger about the lack of separation of religious and state in Israel, about the abuse of Palestinian people, about things like that. And I was aware of it. And I developed my own anger about things like that. And when I started to choreograph, it did gave me some fuel, but it was never the reason why I choreograph. I never, even if I thought I really want to give us a political statement, I tamed myself that this shouldn't be why I choreograph. But I let it, again, I call it more, you know, it's a little bit like, I'm changing a little bit the idea of politics, but I want to talk about style, because you said about my dancing. I always want to be dancing as though as I have no style. And the reason is because style of anything is a way of representing something. The style is the way of representation, something. I'm interested in the something. I'm interested in the essence. Then I can choose how I represent it. And I don't have to choose a particular style. I can choose the way I want to represent something. And if I am subject myself to one style or even two styles or three styles, it's still, I am representing my essence in a particular style, and I don't want to do that. So for me, when I use style, or when I do the cliche of different styles, my dancers know the difference, many different ways. We can laugh at ourselves doing different styles of dance. We do it very consciously without being subjected to it. Because what we really connect ourselves is to the essence of dance, which has to do with, first of all, the animal we are. It has to do with the fact that we have senses, that we have flow of energy, that we have muscles that we can contract and stretch, that we can enjoy the pleasure of dancing, and that we can be very efficient, a little bit like when you see an animal hunting. Animal hunting is a beautiful thing to watch, but the animal doesn't care about how they look like. And that's why we don't have mirrors in the studio. It's forbidden to use and look at the mirror in our dance, because we become very efficient, very clear form, but it's all connected to the scope of sensations. Did I relate to what you said?
Well, you did, and it's amazing because you're sort of touching many questions that I want to ask while we're together during this hour. Because really what you talk about, it's funny, it's as if there could be a term, not dance. There could be another term, because really for you it's movement. And you use movement always to deliver a message. There is a message. And if it's political, it's subliminally so. It's really a moral and ethical expression, probably responding to things that are happening all around you. So we're going to come to that, but I don't want to leave your history quite yet. I mean, your first years were on a kibbutz. And this notion, the thing that you said earlier on about your parents, what you learned by watching them, listening to them, and their anger or frustration about things that happened in the broader world, the social or political world around them. Do you think that you carried a lot of that? You've carried that with you, and that's where this notion of dance being about movement, but movement that makes a message comes from?
I think my parents were always questioning, and they were, now that I reflect on them, I didn't think of it this way, but there were people who were open to change their mind. They were very creative people. The power of imagination was big part of their being. And they're also very skillful in what they did. So this is something that definitely is composed, what I think of is a creative process and artistic expression. It does combine of the power of imagination, the skills, and our passion. You know, we actually call it the Holy Trinity. This is our Holy Trinity: our passion, our skills, and the power of imagination. And this is something that definitely I saw in my parents growing up. I didn't call it this way then, but it's in my genes and in my upbringing.
You know, it definitely is there. And again, just referring to these home movies of you dancing as a kid, you know, you say you don't have signature movements, but if you look at some of that footage, it's amazing that you see a kind of genetic vocabulary that's still with you. You know, you said before that it doesn't matter where in the world you're dancing. You know, I focus on East and West because it has to do with sort of the aesthetic unfolding of things over across time, but certainly in the last 100 years. And you say, and I know it's true for you, that it doesn't matter where you are when you are dancing. But I want to
it's not that it doesn't matter. It matters, but it's not what manage me. For example, you can look at two ballet dancers doing the same movement. One of them excites you and one of them bore you, but they're doing the same dance. And why is it exciting on one and why is it boring on the other one? It's because one is connected to the essence and one connect to the style. One is without flow, one without fantasy, and one with it. One danced in front of a mirror all their life, and one just danced because he loved to dance. You can look at two dancers that do kabuki or to do any style or flamenco, or so one of them the same will bore you, one of them will excite you. So I'm interested in what is it that is sublime about dance, and this can never be the style. And this can never be connected to geography. But the geography brings us richness and possibilities that we can learn from, experience of others that we can learn from. So I welcome that in my studying and also in the dancers that come to work with me.
And you're taking me exactly where I wanted to go next. You know, in 1974, you started with Batsheva. Martha Graham arrived and you came to New York. And it might have unlocked the opportunity for the rest of your life in the dance world in New York. You came and you had an incredible experience there. And I want you to talk about that a bit, but then you left and came back. You left and you returned. And I think this speaks to exactly what you were just talking about. It's not about where it is, it's about how you and those dancing with you absorb what's happening around you and use it as forms of expression in what you're doing. But talk about when you went there and why you didn't stay, what you got out of the experience and why you returned.
The more I advance in my choreography career is the more I appreciated actually my experience with Martha Graham. I saw her uniqueness, genius, and not when I was with her. When I was with her, I was much more dealing with just difficulties of being in New York alone, never been out of Israel. My social skills or lack of them. So that was more where I was dealing with my injuries. So later on, when I reflect about her and what she gave me, I can see it more. I did leave Martha Graham and I did leave New York, but I came back to New York and lived there for more than 10 years. And this is where I started to choreograph. I started to choreograph in 1980 and I came to Israel in 1990. So there were 10 years, very meaningful, important, and very difficult, but very, so much learning experience. And it's the body of work that I did in New York that the people of Batsheva recognize. And this is why they invited me. And the reason I came back, beside the fact that I wanted to come back, but you can't always get what you want. But this time I got what I want because they wanted me to come back. They want me to come and direct Batsheva Dance Company. And that was a lot thanks to the body of work that I developed in New York.
Well, and also your time in all the social input and the cultural input that you experienced while you were in New York clearly had an impact on what you brought back in the toolkit that you would use after that to grow Batsheva. And, you know, I want to pick a few examples of your work after you came back, and we're going to show some clips. But before that, I want you to talk a bit of, and again, this has to do with it doesn't matter where you are in a way, talk about who's in the company today. You know, it's amazing when you look at the company. You're not looking at Israeli dancers, you're looking at dancers from all over who are with you there.
The company already, when was first founded, was always a mix of dancers from different countries. This is very typical to all dance companies. I'm a frequent guest in different dance companies in the world. And sometimes, for example, there's a company, beautiful company in Holland. They have 30 dancers and only 2 of them will be Dutch and the rest will be from all over. In Batsheva, it's usually about half and half Israeli and half from different countries. And it's easy because you don't need to talk the language. You speak English as we rehearse. And we welcome dancers, talented dancers who want to join the company.
And you know, I've had the privilege to watch you in workshop settings, and you're right, it's not about language. And again, you're never teaching a vocabulary. You're not teaching a specific vocabulary. You're communicating about how a dancer can make movement as a form of expression. And so it's beyond, it's like your own Rosetta Stone. You know, it's beyond any one language. And
it's the language. It's the language of dance. It is a language, but it's the language of dance. It's just like when you say message in my work, the message of my work is a message that connects to texture, colors, tension between elements, dynamics. It's not the narrative of dance. It's not the narrative of a story. And it's important to remember that when you experience it, just like when you listen to music, you don't look for the story. Or when you look at the abstract painting, you don't need to look for what is this painting about. It's about itself. And this is what my work is first. It's about itself. It's not a mirror of the world. I try to create my own universe, and the world itself represents, first of all, itself. You can then, it can then touch your own experience, and you can reflect from it on your own experience. And this is why the audience will reflect differently on what they see and experience differently.
And which is why it doesn't matter where they are from or whether or not they know or understand the source of inspiration for the work. And this is actually a great segue to come to Ohad Naharin, which is the work that put Ohad on my radar in 1998. And it is, the story of it is a traditional Passover song. It has a narrative. It comes with its own history. And it connects to this, it's tribal in a way, but that isn't what you intended with it, I don't think. And it took on another dimension when it became the source of political controversy in 98. I want us now to watch it. We're going to watch the whole piece. It's about 7 minutes, but there's no way to start it and stop it without seeing the whole piece, which you'll understand now when we watch it.
אשליית הכוח.
It means the illusion of beauty.
וקו דק שמפריד בין שיגעון ושפיות.
A fine line that separates madness and sanity.
הפניקה שמאחורי הצחוק.
The panic behind the laughter.
ודו-קיום של עייפות ואלגנטיות.
אני יודע, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. שניים אני יודע, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. שלושה אני יודע, אני יודע, שלושה, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. אבא אני יודע, ארבע אמהות, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. חמישה אני יודע, חמישה חומשי תורה, ארבע אמהות, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. שישה אני יודע, אישה, אני יודע שאישה סדרי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, 1 אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. 7 אני יודע, 7 אני יודע, 7 ימי שבתא, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, 1 אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. 8 אני יודע, 8 אני יודע, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבתא, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, 1 אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. 9 אני יודע, 9 אני יודע, 9 ימי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבתא, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, 1 אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. 10 אני יודע, 10 אני יודע, 10 דבריה, 9 ימי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבתא, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, 1 אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. 11 אני יודע, 11 אני יודע, 11 כוכביה, 10 דבריה, 9 ימי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבתא, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, 1 אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. 12 אני יודע, 12 אני יודע, 12 שבתיה, 11 כוכביה, 10 דבריה, 9 ימי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבתא, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, 1 אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. 13 אני יודע, 13 אני יודע, 13 מדיה, 12 שבתיה, 11 כוכביה, 10 דבריה, 9 ימי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבתא, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, 1 אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ.
'Ohad, thank you for creating that work. You know, when you created it, you obviously weren't thinking that somehow 1998, the 50th anniversary of the State of Israel, was going to change a lot of people's perceptions of what this is about. You know, if we wanted to be formalist, what I see here is everything in your life, kibbutz, army, thinking about religion, thinking about tribal practice, politics, all of that is there. But that isn't what it's about. It's exactly about movement celebrating expression through movement. And just say a few words about how you felt when you made it and maybe how you felt after the issues in 1998.
The thing that attracted me most to this music and to this idea is the accumulation, the idea of accumulation. Not the content of the song, but the fact that there is a song that has this system, 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. And when I was, just the last year that I was in New York, I choreographed a piece called The Sinking of the Titanic. This was the title of the music, by the way. Not beautiful, beautiful piece of music by Gavin Bryar, a British musician who succeeded to create music that is based on the last song that was played on the Titanic while it was sinking. And if you should look it up, this piece of music, you really feel like you still hear the echo of that music inside the water of the ocean. It's very beautiful. And in this work, I choreographed to the song, to the Christmas song, on the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me, da, 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 on the second, which is exactly the same accumulation idea, built on the same idea. And also then that what was turning me on. And if most Americans probably know this song, I don't know where all of the people are here from, but this is a song that, so when I came to Israel, I already explored this idea of choreographing to a song with accumulation that has another connotation because it connects strong traditional roots, holiday, family, whatever. And then Ohad Naharin is what I chose to choreograph. And when I first did it, it was done with a different costume also. It was done with khaki, more like the cliche. There is a famous cartoon of Israeli with shorts, khaki shorts and a khaki. That's how we did it first. And the suit came later on when I reworked it and so on.
You know, it's like minimalism and maximalism. It's just the beauty of repetition, but then it's everything. And it's a real history of accumulation for you.
Yeah, for me, repetition is something that I research and explore and use, because for me, I don't even like the idea of repetition because, you know, when we walk, we repeat, we repeat stepping, but walking take us somewhere. So for me, repetition is something that take us somewhere.
You know, let's move to more recently to Venezuela from 2017. As I mentioned, we were preparing to come back to the US then. Venezuela premiered in Jerusalem. Then it also was performed in Tel Aviv or vice versa. I can't remember which happened first. And then we came back and the company came not long thereafter to New York and it was performed here. And we're going to show a short clip from Venezuela, very different in terms of the movement that you see. I think it's one dance performed twice. The first time it's sort of reverential and spiritual. The second time it's chaotic and iconoclastic. And what I realized in that period of time, it also paralleled with this sort of gathering storm of chaos that we're all experiencing now. And it gave that much more meaning to it as a piece for me, seeing it first in Israel and then here. Let's look at the clip first, and then Ohad, if you can say some words about the inspiration for it.
Kyrie
Ohad, I want you, that's such a beautiful segment, and there is such a contrast between the first iteration of the performance and the second, and we're not seeing the second.
Yeah, just I choreographed a 40 minutes work, and it's done twice. It's done by 8 dancers of the company, and then when it's done again, it dance with the rest of the 8 dancers of the company. It's the same, almost the same choreography done twice. What changed is the dancers and the music. That's all. There is no, and what changed is that the interpretation of the dancers offer their interpretation. So a part that is done by the same dance, another dancer of the same part from the first part is done with another interpretation, but the choreography basically the same. And this was you know, when we watch work of art, and also when we live our life, many times we live our life through the experience of what something reminds us of. We see something or we experience something and it reminds us of something else. And many times we experience it through what it reminds us of. And what I wanted to eliminate this. I wanted the audience to watch my work, and if it reminds us of something, I wanted to remind them of what they've just seen 40 minutes ago. So when they see the work for the second time, they are much less reminded. They're first reminded of what they just saw 40 minutes ago. And by this, I wanted to help me, the dancers and the audience, to have a fresh experience. It is not depends on what the experience reminds us of. The experience itself, the fresh moment of experience without what it reminds us of. So this was one of the main things I repeated. And also the fact that we can do similar choreography or the same choreography to totally different music, and to experience how much we are affected by it, even though we knowing it's the same choreography. We know we just hear another music. How much we're affected by the fact that we see something we saw 40 minutes ago. So there is a study about choreography, about the craft, about what we do.
You know, for those who are with us who have not experienced Ohad's work in the theater, often you leave not knowing what you have just absorbed. It comes to you as you reflect on it over time. And again, just thinking from outside, thinking as someone who's experiencing this as a spectator, it's as if it releases you. It gives you a kind of freedom in real time to think about something you've experienced it and use it to help you absorb and understand what's happening in the world around you. You know, Ohad, I want to talk about Gaga for a few minutes. You may or may, everything that we've been talking about is Ohad's philosophy of dance, which is really not about a definition of dance. It's just about celebrating the meaning and importance of movement. And Gaga is the kind of nomenclature for what this philosophy is about. For me, when I first learned about it, it was like opening a Pandora's box. It was the idea that anyone could think or feel that he or she could dance. And that was the point. And the point also, I think, was to give everyone a way to use movement as a form of release or as a form of catharsis. And we're living in crazy times. And I think the philosophy of Gaga has more meaning now because of that.
So Gaga is the way the Batsheva Dance Company is training. We start the morning of our workday with a Gaga class, but it's something that I've developed over many, many years. And at some point, it became also available for people who don't have any experience to dance. And there's a lot of similarity between what is offered to people and what is offered to dancers. A lot more similar than different. It's different in the skills, the dancing skills. And when people ask me what is Gaga, I have different answers that I try to keep it fresh for myself to say what it is. But I will repeat something that I say often, that is a little bit like strengthening our engine. What I mean by that is that life is heavy, life is difficult. There's a lot of weight that comes from that. If we have a strong engine, the weight can be lifted and float. If we have a weak engine, we'll crash. Many times we cannot change the weight, but we can change the engine. And by strengthening our engine, what was heavy become lighter. And this is about an awareness to flow, an awareness to our speed, an awareness to this force of gravity that you now with me, we are all negating it. Because if you did negate it, you will be now on the floor. So we're already dealing with gravity, and it's the most meaningful and important force of our life and of dance. So the way we use it and the way we sense it and the way we utilize it in our way of being, and then how we can connect the negating of gravity on a molecular level, and we can connect it to our efficiency of movement, our delicacy, our ability to become like almost superconductors, so we don't have blockages in our body, and it becomes healing. It connects to our longevity, it connects to our balance, things that and to our survival and ability, and to pleasure and the connection of effort and pleasure, to being at the moment, to groove. Groove without the need of music, just to feel groovy and to feel the virtue of silliness and the ability to laugh at ourselves. All the things that become very, very important and are not connected to being a dancer.
You know, you just said a thing that I wanted to say now, which is that your description of Gaga, it's like training. It's like communicating to people that there's a kind of physical training that can be a strategy for survival. And now more timely than ever, because we're living in such challenging times. And I guess 5 or so years ago, the film called Mr. Gaga was released, which was exactly about the evolution of this narrative through your life and your work. And it first of all, it went viral. Everyone in the world is watching it, because I think everyone in the world was and continues to look for strategies for surviving in these times. For me, what was remarkable a bit was that you're quite private, as we know, and you really like opened your life and the privacy and the history of your life in order to allow that film to be made. And it really did go everywhere. How did that feel for you after it came out?
You know, the being private is not contradict with the idea of having no secrets. In a way, having no secrets helped me to be more private. And I've learned it over the years, and I really believe in it. And I live like I have nothing to hide. And this was an exercise for me. Having a guy, a photographer, a filmmaker, being in the studio for 8 years. It wasn't supposed to be that long, but that's how long it took them to. And then to give him all my archive without even knowing what I'm giving them, because I didn't know what was in all the tapes and what. And the main thing about it maybe is that I like the director. He was a really good, talented, and we became friends. And I love the cinematographer too. We became friends, and we just loved having them around. And even though I was maybe the subject of the film, but I always felt it's his film, it's his project. It's not my film. And I was there to help him, and I enjoyed helping him.
You know, in getting ready for our conversation today, Tina and I watched Mr. Gaga again the other night, and it just seems so timely to me because it's as if it is a guidebook for how to be a proactive conspirator rather than a victim of circumstance in the time in which you live, whenever that time is. And it just makes it hugely timely. I would encourage all of you who are with us to watch it now. It really is very moving to see it at this moment in time. You know, to conclude, I want to talk about one of your latest works, Yag, and for you to tell us, let's see a clip, and then I want you to tell us how it fits into the picture that we're discussing. And the only thing I'll say before the clip is that this is for Ohad an experiment in producing dance for film first rather than on the stage.
פעם, המשפחה שלי אהבה מאוד, מאוד מאוד, מאוד מאוד לרקוד.
Yag was a piece that I first choreographed many years ago, and then I redid it, and then I did it for the movie a few months ago. I chose 6 dancers, and I made them a family. And they introduced themselves as brother, sister, father, mother. And the reason I did it is because when I was living in New York, I saw a theater work of an Arab theater group from Jerusalem called El Akawati, I think. And they show a work downtown in Manhattan, a theater work. And at the end of the performance, I started sobbing, but not just tears came down, my body was shaking. And I realized that the reason I was crying at the end of this show, not because how beautiful and amazing the show was, but because of what I knew about them. They were Palestinians. And I learned from it something huge about how much our experience in the theater or observing connect to our personal life and experience. And I wanted to create a manipulation where I'm doing, I'm a junkie for strong emotions, but I never tell my dancers what to feel, strong feelings. But I wanted to turn the volume on what people can feel by introducing the dancers as a family, as a brother and sister. We actually have this movie online available, so you can understand maybe more what I mean, but that's what I can say about Yag.
And the reason we wanted to conclude with it, you've just described, and it's twofold. One is that you created it now in a medium where it can be anywhere. Again, it's not about where you are and where you're seeing it or experiencing it. It resonates everywhere in the world. And the second point is the power of emotion that it communicates, which is something that's very meaningful now. And really the last comment that I want to make, and we do have time for a question or two if a few have entered the chat box, but what I want to say is that the whole philosophy of your work just carries that much greater power given the complexity of the times that we're living in. And I think what you try to communicate is that dance is about forms of movement that anyone can embrace and that everyone can use to help navigate these times. And it makes what you do in the history of choreography in modern and contemporary times, you have been very powerful and very meaningful and important. But the tools that you're providing for everyone just now are quite important for how we're living in the times that we're in. And we want to thank you for that.
Thank you, James.
Ava, if there might be a question or two that you want to ask from the chat box, we can do it now.
Yes, we have a question from Augusto B, who is asking where we can find longer versions of these clips online. Very
I think if you go into the Batsheva Dance Company website, they might direct you to. We don't have. I don't film my work much. Yag was actually the first time that I film my work. There were a couple of times where I allow other people to film a couple of my works. It never made me happy. But this production of Yag was very interesting and satisfying. And one of the main reasons it was so satisfying is because with all my work that live on stage, I never finished the process. It's ongoing. And here I have a project that I have to close. The movie is done, it's finished. I can let go of it. And it was very like a celebration to be able to say, this is it. And I really enjoyed the time in the studio, the time in the editing room. That was a huge learning experience. And it was a lot about the composition, that, you know, a frame. When I look at the stages, I look also at the frame. Anyway, I don't know if it's available, but I think might be available, and when the company will stream it again.
You know, actually, the main point to make here is that we know that historically, Ohad has not been so interested in film versions of his work. To see them live is what matters most. And something important about doing Yag as a film is that because of the times in which we live, it's a new way for Ohad to communicate all of this to a much larger audience. So with that, Ohad, really, we thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I do encourage everyone to look for material about Ohad's work and to look and see what is available, because it does carry a lot of meaning for our lives today. So thank you all, a pleasure to be together.
Maybe even more, to see the show.
Yeah. Yes.
Everything else is a little bit like the gossip about it, but it is to see it.
We will do so. Thank you very much.
Right.
And thank you all for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you, James.